Hey everybody, it's Nolan Walker here with Roofers Paradise. Today we have Brett Huizenga from Hometown Roofing out of Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm pretty sure the .com is hometownroofing.com. And Brett, before you start up, today I'm interested in a couple of things with you. One thing is you were a personal finance manager, among other things. You said you'd worked at TD Ameritrade. And you've gone from kind of corporate America, working for somebody to working for yourself. I find that very intriguing. It's kind of the backbone of what the podcast is about. I really am in business of helping roofers. You're a recent new client, which I appreciate, for Roofing Webmasters too, just to disclose that. But I like the concept of entrepreneurship and dreams and what someone's paradise is. So I'd like to talk about that. And then maybe where you've come from and then how you got into the business. But if you don't mind just kind of introducing yourself, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Nolan just said, I'm Brett Huizenga, based out of Omaha, Nebraska. Pretty much born and raised here, except for a small stint in Iowa. So I'm a local boy through and through here. Yeah, I mean
So you're from Omaha? Then?
I am. Yeah, I actually. The funny part of the story is my business, where it's located now, is in Millard, which used to be a suburb of Omaha. That's actually where I grew up. So I used to drive by the street that I'm currently located at for business. Right. I used to drive by it, every few days back when I was 11, 1 to 11.
Yeah. So I think that I think that a lot of people form ideas about what they want to do when they're a kid around the ages of 7 to like 15 range. I talk about this a lot. I probably really overthought this stuff, but when I was a kid, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've told that story a bunch of times. I walked across stage in 5th grade and everybody laughed because everybody else wanted to be football players and lawyers and stuff. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I've wanted this for a long time, but things go off track in life and you get on and off of stuff. Now, I pretty much always worked for myself, but somewhere I let other stuff get into my head, propaganda, what other people say you should be doing for a living. And I told you this briefly, but I didn't elaborate on it, Brett. When I was a kid, my parents had gotten divorced and I was going to go to the local Ivy League-ish school. It was called TCU, or Texas Christian University. And it's very well known in our parts. And it's the best college to go to probably in Fort Worth. But that didn't end up happening after my parents split up. So I had forgotten the entrepreneurial stuff a little bit. And I was going to go to college, but my stepdad wasn't having any of that. And I was actually just out on my ass. And so I did pay for some junior college here and there, but I was going to be a finance guy. I wanted to, help people with wealth management, stockbroker, and I was going to go to the Neely School of Business. So a 4-year degree to a master's program at the Neely School of Business at TCU. And that was all just blown up. And I will tell you my part of it. I'm curious about your story right around this topic and we can get into some roofing stuff, but I think this stuff is fascinating. When I felt bad about this for years and years and years, because the society tells you got to get a degree. Things seem to have kind of had a shift in the last couple of years since COVID about this topic, about how people feel about it. But I felt bad forever. And it took me a very long time personally, and I'm talking like decades, like maybe a couple of decades, to reconcile this fully in my head. A little over 2 decades until I felt comfortable and was like, I probably made the right decision for me. I'm glad I'm an entrepreneur and own my own businesses. It's just such a tough road that when you're going down the road of being an entrepreneur, whatever you're doing, roofer, whatever it is, there's so many ups and downs that you look over your shoulder and say, oh, should I have gone down the road that everyone else does? Should I have stuck with that? Because things aren't going well for me now as a business owner. Now things have been going well for a while, and I can look back and say, I did fine. I'm comfortable with who I've become and where I am. But tell me about your experience with going down the road that I wanted to go down. And if you
Yeah.
don't mind. Yeah.
No, I think that's, for entrepreneurs in general and other guys that I know that own businesses, it's not a dissimilar stream that you went through. I think because for me, like, you look back and hindsight's always 2020. So you try to connect the dots. Like, how did I end up where I am today?
Right. Right.
I growing up, my dad, and this is where I think the seed was planted. My dad was a sales guy through and through. He moved from Iowa to Nebraska, just him and my mom. So he had really an entrepreneurial spirit. And at one point, he decided he was going to open his own business. So I watched him do that. It wasn't a start from scratch situation. It was almost like an owner, what do I want to call it? Owner run business, right? So it's a Fremont One Nelson. I don't know if you
Like
know.
a sole proprietorship type.
Yeah.
Just one guy doing most of the work.
Well, you have kind of it's almost a chain, but it's the managers of that branch own it.
Okay.
So he does everything. It's just that you have a lot of the back end already solved for you.
Right.
So I watched him open a business in Fremont, Nebraska, an even smaller town. And I think that's where the seed was planted, because even growing up, like, I would always be kind of like a little hustler, right? Like, they're always trying to figure out if I could make a couple bucks here and there. Like, it was always interesting to me, the lemonade stands, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then you get to kind of like you were saying, you're in high school. Everyone's picking these jobs that have titles that exist, but you don't know what does it. You don't know what you don't know. Right. So when I graduated from high school, it was kind of like, well, I'm just gonna. I basically followed my sister to a small college because I don't know what I'm gonna do. Thought I wanted to be a cop. Went on a couple ride-alongs. Decided that was the last thing I wanted to do. So I ended up still starting a degree in sociology because it was tied to the criminal justice realm.
Yeah.
Ended up transferring to a local college here back in Omaha, University of Nebraska, Omaha. I took, I think, 3 additional years. I mean, I didn't take your typical college track either. I basically came back here and started working full time while I was in college.
And are you getting a finance degree around this time, or
no? It was sociology, but the interesting thing was this college here, you could do an emphasis in business.
Okay.
So I switched, even though it was a sociology degree, I kind of had touches on like organizational structure and that type of thing, which, do I use any of that? I have no idea. Maybe some of it stuck at the time, but I'm not sure. So
I
did from that, but at the same time, I was working full time. I worked in the hotel industry. I sold steaks, Omaha steaks, probably a lot of people.
Yeah.
I would do that on the outbound sales side. I sold Cutco knives. So
you really were a sales guy selling just about anything and everything, getting going.
Yeah, I saw my dad do it for so many years. I knew how to do it somehow.
Well, I always worry about that. You don't want to be, death of a salesman type life either. It's important that you earn money and invest and all that. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but your perspective on earning money is probably going to be interesting. But yeah, so you get degreed, and then after what were you were selling while going to college the whole time, like working while going to college?
Yeah, selling the knives, selling the steaks, right, doing all that kind of stuff in college. And then I was working for Hyatt hotels for many years. I was actually a manager there.
That sounds rough to me, by the way. Hospitality sounds like a very rough job.
That was another one of those jobs. That one and detasseling would be the top 2 that I'm.
What is detasseling?
So when I was a kid, so my family moved from Omaha, which is a bigger city, to Fremont, smaller city, and I went to a really small school that only had 50 kids in it.
Right.
Detasseling in the cornfield, you actually they breed corn, right? So corn, when they breed corn, it has tassels.
Okay.
On the it's crazy, but like there's male rows and female rows, and you have to pull the tassels off all the female rows so they don't cross this different string corner.
Pollinate or whatever. Yeah.
So here I am, a 12, 13-year-old kid who's 4 foot tall,
Right.
can barely reach the top of the corn, and I'm like, trying to yank tassels out. It was the worst job.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. So yeah, so you go through, and I mean, for finance, I mean, are you helping people invest their money, that sort of thing, like managing people's accounts, or what are you doing for the finance job that you had?
So in 2009, when everything was blown, the world was ending, right, for a lot of people.
Right.
And I was working for Hyde at the time, and I looked at that. I'm like, this is so interesting. Why is everyone so crazy? I grew up. I'm Dutch, right? Like, we save money, so
Right.
I knew how to save money. I didn't know what to do with it once you saved it, though. But I had kind of saved enough that I'm wondering, like, well, what do I do with this now? What's the next move? And so I was watching CNBC and all that stuff at that time, and I just happened to have a buddy who worked at TD Ameritrade, and he got me linked up. So in 2009, I jumped in there. Some of the craziest stuff, some of the craziest phone conversations I've ever had was at TD Ameritrade.
Like what? Like Wolf of Wall Street stuff, crazy, or like what kind of stuff, man?
You got to remember, at that time, people were losing their livelihoods. Like, people were jumping out of buildings legitimately over
the credit default swap, the big short.
Yeah, and so what happens there is, margin call. I think they actually made a movie like this, right? A margin call is when you borrow money to buy stocks, and then if that stock goes down, at some point you're not playing with your own money. And TD Ameritrade says, "Hey, we're calling your loan." Is really what they're doing. That's a margin call. So I'm calling people saying, "Hey, you got to put money in your account," and it's
oh my God,
hey,
that was your job. You're basically a bill collector for TD Ameritrade.
Yeah, at that time. So just people, it was rough. It was rough the first couple of years, but after that, I got super in. I'm always curious. I've always been curious about stuff, right? So I wanted to know more about trading. Like, why are people doing it? Why are people getting themselves in this situation? So I went way deep into it. TD Ameritrade had purchased Thinkorswim, the trading platform.
Okay.
Like a year or two before I started there.
I'm not familiar with it, but okay, yeah.
It's the fancy charts. It's the bells and whistles that you always see, like the stonk guys showing off.
I have a TD Ameritrade account, but I don't feel comfortable ever doing anything with it, hardly, quite frankly. I pulled my money out of everything right before this last downturn that just happened, and I'm like, don't really feel like doing it on my own,
Yeah. No, I loved it. Like, I got into I was licensed broker, futures, Forex, options. I did all that. I was sent around to teach people how to use the platform. So
do you still invest yourself? Like, or do you consider yourself a conservative investor of your own money? Or do you do all it? Because I talk to guys, we're getting a little off in the weeds here, but yeah. I talk to guys that are roofers and contractors. They own they'll own Bitcoin and blockchain stuff, and like they have no idea what they're doing with it now that now it's taking a hit again. And like, do you do that kind of stuff, or do you stay conservative? You don't have to tell me your investments. I mean, are you a conservative investor since you've done this and watched other people go broke, or are you do you?
That's the biggest thing. I've seen enough, especially the Ameritrade, of people who got, I call it, getting out over the front of your skis.
Right.
I still do stuff with options. I don't do futures as much anymore because you just have to babysit it so much.
You're not doing a lot of margin call stuff and stretching your neck out.
No, I don't buy anything on margins. I mean, there's different ways you can do it. I mean, options are kind of a type of margins. Just
different. So I talked about a topic related to this the other day. And one thing that I made a huge mistake on is when I first started in business, I had a lot of money at one time, and money just kind of goes away if you don't invest it, by multiple avenues, inflation right now,
yep.
Or you just spend it. when I paid myself income, and I like to get into this when I talk to people, and hopefully this will be interesting to people for a roofer. But any business, you take in income, right? And eventually you've got to get out of that because you're not going to produce income your whole life. Hopefully you'll live long enough and you'll be old and you can enjoy your life, but you're not going to be a participating member of society in the point, typically, most people, and that you're earning income, whether from a job or a business. And I always treated my business like too much of a separate entity, which you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I would take a check to live off of. But if my business earned extra money, I would expand the business or try something new or buy something, for the business. I didn't do anything too crazy. Get a bookkeeper, receptionist, a better office space, and my money would just always kind of go away. What I wish I had done was to treat my business kind of like myself. And if I had money, like what somebody with a job does that has like a more corporate job, is they have a 401k, or they go, oh, this is it. This is how much money I have. So I know I have to invest some or I won't be able to retire. But
Right.
Business owners come out the gate and they don't have any consultant. They don't have any mentor, and they treat their business too much like a separate thing and keep all that money in there. The problem with businesses, as you expand too much, they tend not to make money. The expenses go up, conversion goes down, and the money just kind of goes away. And what I wish I'd done is paid myself income and then done distributions when there was profit that specifically had to go into an investment, whether it was with a financial advisor like a TD Ameritrade guy, which I don't think I should be doing on my own, quite frankly, for the most part.
Right.
Or I, like buying real estate, which a ton of roofers get into. So they go, I'm going to buy real estate. But what I don't like seeing, because I know that it usually fails, is when a guy goes and has a business that's booming and like, man, I got it going this year. I made $1 million. We had a hailstorm. Heck yeah. They buy a truck. They hire someone to answer the phones during this hailstorm, got a little bigger office, maybe got an estimator that was paid, or foreman, whoever, someone on payroll. So expenses went up, and then hail doesn't hit, and they expanded and they went from, Omaha, Nebraska to wherever, Iowa or whatever. So they went over, did another market. Oh, we've expanded. And then, overnight, the expenses just, boom, they double, and conversion goes down. The owner's not in one spot, and they didn't invest any of it. And then you look up and 20 years have passed, and that happened to me over and over again like that. And it mainly was from me thinking too big and not honing down and having some basic financial literacy and understanding. I didn't have a good mentor for this either, Brett. And so these are things that I wished I had done, which I'm pretty sure you probably won't make the mistake of, because you had this excellent education of the credit default swap crisis. I love that book, by the way. I read the book before the movie with Michael Burry, and Michael Lewis, I think, wrote the book, The Big Short, was it? Cornhole Capital, or Cornwall. They called them Cornhole. You remember that part of it? Great book, though, if anybody wants to understand that fully. It was one of my favorite books I've ever read, really. The movie was okay. They dumbed the movie down for people that didn't understand it at all, with Anthony Bourdain and stuff giving dumb references, trying to explain it to people. But the book was way better.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Like,
Nolan Walker here for Roofers Paradise. So I'm looking for podcast guests for Roofers Paradise, and I'd like to hear from you. If you're a roofer or somebody in the industry that's looking to talk about their product, I'd like to hear from you. If you're a roofer and you want to tell your story, I'd love to speak with you. Also, we will blog and put a link back to your website, give you a little juice. It'll help you out, and it'd be great for you to get on here and tell your story, and just to have it recorded. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Look us up on roofersparadise.show, email us, and we'll call you back.
Even the education that I had coming into this, though, like, it was interesting because this is the first time I went out like by myself, right? Like, I always had worked for a company, so I didn't have any idea I had blind spots, right? I still have a lot of blind spots, but the one thing I knew is like, I can look at the numbers and right away, I'm like, if I'm buying a business, just like when you buy a stock, is it needs to be making money and it should be worth something. Like you need to build it as an asset, right? Build out the brand. I knew that part
Right.
going. I think a lot of guys don't look at that because I think a lot of guys in this industry are in it for the fast cash. And I guess, from my background, I'm thinking more longer term. So the one of the first things I did when I came in here, I put a 401k on the company, and my sales guys can put money in it. And the first thing I do at the end of the year, I mean, I paid myself like a $40,000 salary when I first started out here, right? The minimum I needed to live while I figured everything out. I gave myself a bigger cushion because I'm like, I don't know what I don't know again. So it's my hedge against my own risk.
Healthy fears you got, I think, right? Good fear and good response to your fear, like a low salary and, until you figure it out.
But at the end of the year, then, like you were saying, like take your distributions, like you got to pay yourself something. So, I mean, I max out my 401ks, right? That's my background. So
okay.
I push dollars to future me all the time. And when I was advising it, I always tell people, it's pretty simple. Just make your buckets. You always have your emergency fund. It's the same thing in business. Have your emergency
fund. That's a great statement. Future me needs investment. Future me is going to be older every time, might or might not be as physically or mentally sound. Needs more, may or may not slow down with or without expertise. Future me needs a lot of stuff, I like the sound of all that, and it does sound easy, Brett, but I think it's tough for people, very tough, right?
Business is a grind, and to have that mentality of like thinking 30 years road. I think the older you get, the more you think about it. But if you're in your 20s and early 30s, it's not as big of a thought. But if you start then, you have a lot
compounded money, right? And it's a big difference.
Yeah. And that's why I always tell people, you have your slow money and your fast money and your long money, right? You got to think about all three of those things, because you need all three at the end of the day. You can chase one by itself for a long time, but without the other ones, if you want to be successful, I think you need all three.
I've got a client in Dallas who has condos in a really fancy suburb, a little enclave of Dallas. He's done very well and invested it. I think that most of the roofers are going to buy real estate. I'm pretty sure of that. Not as many are going to be invested with some sort of stock portfolio, like you're going to be. But I think it's interesting. I also wanted to talk about, so you talked about building a brand. Some guys got it going, other ones better than other ones. The name is phenomenal. I'm pretty sure that you bought into this company that'd been around a long time. Hometown Roofing. It's got the word roofing in it. It's got a brandable name. It'd been around a while. So these are huge things. You got like a great branded company name already that had that name brand awareness, that was a proper brand, meaning it didn't have a fake name with it, like Omaha Roofing Co. That's a really bad name because it's just a keyword. This is the word hometown with roofing. The word roof being in it is topically relevant. I always tell people it's better than having the word construction or builder or something that doesn't have the word roof. That doesn't mean if you don't have the word roof that you immediately go change your name. There's a lot of other factors involved. But in this case, everything's correct. You're in a large enough town and you've got this trust and tenure with Google, a Google account with already about 100 reviews on it. And so it's a perfect setup of all this. You've already been doing this for how long now? Several years, like 3 years, I think you told me, or?
Yeah, I took over the company end of 2018. So 2000.
Are you happy so far with what you've been doing?
Yeah, I love doing my own thing. Like I could never go back and work for someone else at this point. Like that would be impossible.
Nobody want to hire me. I always tell people, say I'm too hard to get along with. Like, I don't want to follow orders from somebody ever, like ever.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm the type of person, if someone tells me what to do, I'm like, I mean, I have walls go up immediately and like, why are you telling me what to do? And like, what is your benefit from this and what's going on? Like, I start just questioning everything immediately. So do you find that you work more now or do you work less? I mean, you probably think about work longer than you used to at very least, right? But I don't know. What have you experienced on that? Are you working more or less?
I think probably the same amount. Because even when I was, even through college, I'm doing college and working full time.
Yeah.
After TD Ameritrade, I'm doing that. Plus I started doing some real estate stuff on the side. So I've always been,
everything you mentioned was like really hard jobs, like hospitality, stock market stuff, farming. All these are like not known for being like really long hours. All these jobs.
Yeah, I've never been afraid of work. Like I know how to grind. I probably did it too much because I'll just get into something and which is good to have, but if it's focused on the wrong things, which is probably one of the hardest parts now about owning a company, is like you can get so tunnel visioned on one thing.
Taking time. So
yeah, then you look up and you're like, why am I still doing that thing when I've got these 10 other things that are way more worth my time doing? You just kind of get stuck in it. So that's been a struggle. And adding, now I have 3 kids coming out of COVID. I added 2.
oh wow.
So it's been
I got 3 kids, by the way. So same.
Yeah, it's a transition. It is. And that's probably the hardest part right now is like, I have 4 babies and a wife, right? And hometown is my 4th baby, plus all these other little things that I've been doing. So it's been more about like, focusing in on hometown. So I put in some hours, but I make sure I get home.
So you got more, do you feel like you have more freedom than you used to since or do you feel like you can, I don't know, go on a vacation easier right now?
In the first 3 years, I'm just starting in this year. I've pulled back a little bit, spent time with the family, make sure I'm taking those vacations.
Right.
I'm heading down actually this week. I'm heading down to Arkansas to my sister's place.
Okay.
Take, family pictures and that type of thing. But while I'm going down there, I'm actually meeting up with another guy that I know owns a roofing company down there. So it's never like 100% off.
Yeah, I get you. I go on vacations too, and I work while I'm on vacation, but I go to a specific place. I know the area and I'm able to relax, but I still wake up and work in the morning. And then I go join the family.
It's hard to, I'm working on it. It's hard to make that split, right? Because your mind is always.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know what to even tell people about this. One thing I will say, you said earlier, why am I doing this? There's other things I could be doing. I hear people say these things that other people tell them, like hire the right people, get a system in place. Man, I mean, it sounds nice, but we're not like Apple or Coca-Cola or something. We're small business people. So how exactly do you hire the right people to run your business? There's this idea that floats around, and it usually comes from a business coach or someone on Instagram. And maybe there's a few people that do it. And I talk about this every once in a while, but pretty much any successful business owner all the way to billionaires, you'll see them working all the time. Like Elon works all the time, right? Like he's constantly working. He obviously doesn't do things that he used to do, but he still does other things. And so there's always work to be done, and you're always going to have your hands on the business when you run a small business. You might delegate things that you used to do, but every once in a while you have to go do the things even that you used to do, or else you'll lose your edge on business. Somebody will take advantage of you in the sales department or the bookkeeping department or whatever it is. You're constantly having to get back into the weeds and figure it out. You personally probably still do all this other, sales, bookkeeping, investment, you're reconciling, you're doing job costing, you're doing all of it. It's just that as you go and grow, you'll do other things and you'll find good people over time. But since you run a service business, it's constantly a struggle to have enough good people and find it. For me, it's more important to have some gross volume of money through the company, and then an attempt to make that into net profit by watching conversion costs, expenses. And then you can have that. And then it's important to have that go into a vehicle for investment so that the income that's earned turns into some sort of passive income or real estate or capital gains income tax, something that grows and works on your money without it being, something that's just an income tax that doesn't come in unless you worked that, that day, that week.
Yeah, I think that comes to what are your goals at the end of the day? I think when you first start a business, it's a bigger grind. Even for me, coming as an established business, I'm going from 100% of stuff on paper, not 100%, maybe like 90% of stuff on paper, to adding a CRM. And so it's a grind, because at the end of the day, like with my background, I look at it like, how do I, again, turn it to a brand, turn it to an asset? Because that's also a way to run a business. Like, what's the exit strategy at the end of the day?
So we talked about this the other day on a podcast, and it essentially is, even if you don't plan on selling your business, it should be run as though you're going to. Because if you don't run your business like it could be sold, then it doesn't run as efficiently while you're running it, doesn't make money. So that means that you have systems and procedures in place so that somebody doesn't buy just a sole proprietorship of one guy working his butt off, and there's really no substance there, no brand, no leads coming in, no structure for an estimate, etc. So it doesn't mean you want that. I'm not saying that somebody shouldn't do these things. I'm just saying you will be very involved. But when someone talks about selling a business, you don't have to ever sell the business. You can hand it off to your children, but if it's not run like somebody would buy it, it's probably not profitable anyway, or at least very unsatisfying to manage, because you're working your ass off as a sole proprietor. I have a large structure behind me of 15, 20 people, and it's been run this way for over a decade for my current business. Yeah. So, yeah. I think that's, and you may sell it and you may not, but you have to run it that way in the first place. I will say, Brett, you're probably got a lot of edge on like financial awareness and all this, but in my opinion, someone doesn't have to start a business plan. You can write down something on a sheet of paper and have a little plan. It doesn't, everybody's like, get a business plan. These are things that I call BS on, because if you do a business plan, the bank's not going to give you a loan. SBA's not going to give you a loan. Unless you had a hard asset like a piece of property, possibly they would, or some equipment or machinery. Somebody on specialty financing is going to do it, not your bank. And a business plan isn't going to be used in which to do this. A business plan might come into play if you're purchasing an existing business structure through the SBA. Like Brett might have been able to get one. He probably didn't, but he might have been able to put a business plan together with the existing earnings of an existing business. And if it didn't have some hard asset like real estate, and it was all blue sky money in the air, you can't get much money for that. And the more, in fact, by the way, on this topic, if somebody had the ability to go pick up a name that was branded, been around a while, and the guy had done a poor job of this, some guy like Brett comes in and gets you for a 1.5 of net earnings, as opposed to 3.5, like they could have gotten if it was more well-structured, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in going through this transaction, again, now hindsight being 2020, I can look at a business much better now. And there's other things that I would do due diligence wise, as far as like pricing out a business. Right. But it also helps me to realize, like, okay, if I am going to sell this business, how should it look that it's appealing to somebody else and appealing to the person who has the kind of dollars for the amount of money I want to sell it for.
Right.
So if I'm like, hey, I want to sell my business for $20 million, well, what does that look like? And you said, maybe business plan isn't as important, but I'd say there's two components to that. I think the business plan is important, but I think that it gets overcomplicated Like maybe your business plan is like, I just want to grind it out and make as much money as I can. Okay, well, that's a business plan.
Right.
It's not something that someone's going to want to buy, right? Because it's
When
all
I meant like preparing something for a bank to see. Like I
Yeah.
do think someone needs a plan, like you're talking about the buckets to put money in and what the ultimate goal is. And somebody like you has this set up, and most likely, and I'd want to state too, that you're talking about investing in buckets. Brett's not going to sell a business until he's secured with his family, probably, right? You never know if the next business is going to make money, but there might come a day where you've worked your tail off 5, 6, 7 years from now, and you've bought enough real estate or you have enough stock investments, and you're like, I'm good, especially if I collect $4 million for my business with whatever the capital gains tax is for the purchase of, of the entity at that point.
Yeah.
So there'll come a time, when you can do it if you've handled yourself well.
Nolan Walker here for Roofing Webmasters. You may not know, but I own a digital marketing agency named Roofing Webmasters. We've been doing this for 12 years. I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds of roofers. We've got hundreds of satisfied clients right now, and we'd love to add you to our client mix. I tell you what, we'll help you with your design, your content, your code base, your SEO, your ranking on Google, your map ranking, all that stuff. We also have software called Data Pins that we wrap into it. We are one of the only legit agencies out there that actually help people. Everybody that we have is month to month for a monthly fee on an ongoing basis. You'll get an assigned account rep, and our team of 15 people will help you get as dominant as we can. If you've never had proper digital marketing agency support, you owe it to yourself to call us at Roofing Webmasters or email. Look us up online, roofingwebmasters.com, and give us a call when you're ready.
Yeah, and that's why it goes back to, what are you trying to accomplish? Because for me, I'm like, it's kind of weird, but in my heart, I'm really lazy. So I'm always like, if I work really hard, maybe I can be really, really lazy like I want to be later on, but I know I have to work really, really hard to get to that point.
Yeah.
And the more I worked really, really hard, the more you realize like, maybe it's not that fun to be that lazy.
I don't know. I agree with you. Like, what I always wanted to do, and I've upgraded the dream over to where it gets so complicated that you need a lot of money for it. But I used to want to be just a guy that had my family were farmers from Oklahoma. So I was the first generation not born on a farm. I want to have an orchard in Maui, but orchards in Maui, Brett, are really expensive,
They're probably fun.
They're millions. They cost millions, right?
Yeah.
Just to get 5 acres in a house, like it might cost you $3-4 million. I don't know, but it's expensive to be a gentleman farmer in Maui. But I see that. I'm like, that'd be a great lifestyle for me to farm and dig holes for plants and plant a tree and watch it grow and pick fruit and hand out whole bunches of apple bananas to my friends, and meet them at the farmer's market. That the problem that I have is as I get there, you're ruined to some degree. When you have worked as hard as you and I have worked, you're somewhat ruined. And like the idea of me doing that is still there, and I will do that, but I feel ruined a little bit. And I'm sorry to tell people this, but it's like working your ass off for decades and then just stopping, like, okay, I'm done, like, I don't know. This is a local Texas reference, but my first name's, Nolan. There's a guy named Nolan Ryan that was one of the most famous baseball players that's still alive today, but he was a pitcher and he played baseball for the Texas Rangers out of Arlington in between Dallas, Fort Worth. And when Nolan Ryan retired, he had to have some sort of bypass surgery like 2 or 3 years later. He gained like 30 pounds. And it's like, this guy went and he's fine now. But the point is, you can't just work every day and then just stop, It's almost impossible. I'm going to try it, Brett, eventually one of these days where I'm like, okay, I work a 4-hour day or a 3-hour day at business, and the rest of the day, I'm this hippie Hawaii farmer
Right.
but we'll see. And I don't know if it's, my wife looks at me and she's like, you're not going to be happy doing that. And I'm like, what do you know? I might be happy doing that.
I got to try it, right?
I'm going to try, by God. Yeah. Don't be trampling my dreams, man. You know?
Well, it's funny you bring that up too, because the previous owner of Hometown Roofing, he was in his 70s, right? So this is now in the back of my mind too. Part of the reason he was ready to be done, the reason I actually acquired Hometown is about 10 years ago, without going deep into the story, I ran into him in Europe at Oktoberfest. And I told him that day, because I knew of his company, I said, hey, when you're ready to sell this thing, I'm interested. Just let me know. So fast forward like 8 years later, at the time, he calls me up. Well, part of the reason he was selling is he had kidney issues. He was on dialysis. He was kind of just sick of the grind and the stress of the business. So 2019 goes by, he ends up getting a kidney transplant. He's on the list. He finally gets one. COVID happens. He can't travel. He can't do anything. Him and his wife would go to Hawaii all the time. Great couple, Now fast forward towards the end of COVID, they start traveling a little bit. Well, he ended up getting COVID. He ended up passing away.
Wow.
Right. So, in my mind, it's like, you have to, you and I are talking like, well, when do you stop? How do you stop? Well, you may not, but you just make sure you have a version of it where you're enjoying some of your time.
Yeah.
Well, you can, because you don't know when your number's up. And
no, you don't. That's why I go to Maui when I'm in quite a decent amount nowadays. But I work a lot. But while I'm there, I know the island extremely well. I've got a property there, and I go there, and then I wake up really early because we've got a 5-hour time difference with Central. And anyway, I wake up early, make calls. I've got my group of people. It works fine, but I at least get to enjoy that while I'm there. If I traveled all around, I wouldn't be able to work and do that very well. The vacations would be shorter, stressful for me. So I go to a really nice place. I know it. And then I do. A lot of roofers do this too. They'll go work a storm in Colorado or Florida. They're like, man, I like Florida a whole lot better than I like Nebraska. I'm going to start a location in Florida, and they'll buy a house in Florida and they'll have a location there. And I won't tell you that the locations always work that well, but they'll kind of pop back and forth. But at least it gets them away, and their vacation begins to get lived in a spot where they did a hail job, or worked a hailstorm. But it's some version of what I do for a roofer, to where they go and they work that, they live in that other location that they have part of the time. And a lot of roofers will end up in Florida or end up in Colorado, which, by the way, is why it's so competitive there. You probably think that Nebraska and Omaha is competitive as hell. It is not anywhere near as competitive. I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
As near as competitive as North Dallas, Collin County, where it hails almost every year, or North Denver, where it hails almost every year, or Florida, where it hurricanes all the time. Those areas have vastly more roofers than all these other areas. So if you are in a spot and you're like, oh, I wish I was in Dallas, I wish I was in Florida, you're way better off in some of these other towns, in my opinion, because a guy like Brett in Omaha could kill it. And if you come over to Dallas or to Florida or to Colorado, you're going to have to fight a lot harder because the percentage of roofers are. So would you agree with that? You think, I know you got competition, but it's not the same to me.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think it depends too, timing wise, right? Like you're talking about like storm areas, and you're absolutely right. The more storms in an area, the more competition it breeds.
Right.
This in particular, from 2013 to 17, had just a boatload of storms and some really hellacious storms. It has spawned tons of companies. Well, now we're going on year 3 without a significant hailstorm around here.
People start leaving.
Running on gas, like XL Roofing. There's you could look them up on YouTube. There's some other podcasts and channels that have talked about them. It is a $30 million company that had multiple locations that went under. They're a few blocks from me, right? So I think that, yes, there's a lot of competition. And I think competition is a good thing because it pushes people to the next level. But if you build your business in a way that, again, me looking at like this brand has been around for a while here in Omaha. If I can continue that and grab market share here, I don't know that I necessarily need to expand to other cities.
You don't have to worry about it. If you build your brand in a localized market, your peaks are going to be higher, your valleys aren't going to be as low. And when there's not storms, you've got a brand, people still buy a cash roof or have to buy a roof. They're not all going to be storm roofs and times like that, but people who survive and do well build brands. They don't go chase the storm as much. The guy that goes and chases the storm, almost always, not always, there's a couple of, I don't know the financials of some of these people, but there's some famous families that chase, storms across the USA. And you guys know who some of these people are, but the guys that I see that make the most money build a brand in a large market area. And then they have a better lifestyle. They enjoy themselves better. I mean, you talk about death of a salesman. That's a lot of times from my experience talking to people for 12 years now, death of the salesman is the guy that's in the weekly motel with a group of door knockers at the most recent storm. That's a rough life, man. Rough life.
Absolutely. And that harkens back to what you were talking about, like people and new business owners and their finances and how to look at it. That book, Profit First. Great book, especially for people starting out in business. I read through it and I was already using some of the ideas in there, but I also understood the financial world a little bit better probably than most people do. But that one's all about, paying yourself first. And that's how you make your business profitable. Because I do see a lot of guys just spend.
It's hard not to. I mean, it really is tough not to. I get on to people about this all the time, or I talk about it, but it's hard not to go buy a truck or wrap a truck or to buy a boat, try to enjoy your life a little bit, but you've got to go invest first, then upgrade your life. You don't upgrade your life before an investment just because of the difficulty of spending income and not getting it back again. Because once the hard-earned income's gone, you don't get it back again. And once you raise your expenses up, you've got no income left to invest anymore. It's a vicious cycle that almost all people have to deal with. So like almost everybody out there is dealing with trying to earn income and invest that income so they can live a better life. And like, it's the majority, like 90+% of people all have this problem. Almost none of us hold lifestyle down to have some money left over. And everybody knows this and has heard this forever, but it's difficult to take your brain and say, hey, I have income from my business. My business just had a really good year. I'm going to drop my expenses right back to where they were after the hailstorm, resist the urge to buy vehicles, expand offices or locations, and take a hunk of that money and put it with my Edward Jones advisor or buy a duplex.
It's the needs versus wants. And like, I always tell people, like, listen, like vehicles for me, I'm not a car guy by any stretch. So the interesting thing to me too is in the roofing industry coming in here, I see these guys roll up with these trucks that have to be $100,000 trucks, right?
Yeah.
Like, and guess who the first people are that roll in here looking for work, especially subcontractors? It's the fancy trucks that come first, right?
Right.
I'm the guy who drove a Mazda 3. I didn't have a truck. I did real estate stuff. I drove a Mazda 3 up until 2018 when I took over this company. And it just so happened that when I bought the company, I bought some trucks with it. So now I have a truck. Otherwise I wouldn't, right? Like I'm that guy that will hold back knowing that I won't have to work as long as everyone else, right?
So I don't always get super personal about this, but I think it's interesting to hear this. I've got condos in Maui that I use for vacation rental management that do very well. I've got a house here. I mean, I've got stuff. I still, because it's so low on my priority list, I'm not telling people I didn't make tons of financial mistakes before, but it's so ingrained in my head on what to do at this point. I bought a Nissan Altima in 2016 for cash that was a year and a half old, and it was a 2015. My wife drives a QX80, which I bought for her recently. She had a Buick Enclave that had so much hail damage that USAA totaled the car. And I'm like, oh my God, they totaled it. And she's like, yeah, woo, they totaled it. And I'm like, I get a new car. And I'm like, turned out being a bad deal for me. They actually bought the car from me to resell it because used cars were doing so well after COVID. And so I got screwed at the hailstorm for the used car. My wife parlays it into a brand new QX80. I still drive the 2000. It was bullshit, right? It's bullshit, man. It's horrible. You know what I'm talking about, though. My wife is like, driving this huge Suburban. She's 5'1", or this huge, SUV. I've got 3 kids. They did kind of need to have more leg room from the Buick Enclave, but I drive the 2015 Nissan Altima. My kids are damn near embarrassed of me at this point when I pull up. They're in a little Christian private school, and all their friends' parents have these nice cars. I was like, well, I do better than your friends' parents do, most of them, and some of them got more money than me, but I'm up there. They're like, yeah, but your car sucks, Dad. And I'm like, yeah, my car sucks, but I'm doing the right things. And I said, you guys need to pay attention to what I'm doing here. This is like the last. I said, when are you going to get a new car? And my oldest daughter's just graduated sophomore, so she's got 2 years left. I said, I get one eventually. I get a new car eventually. This Altima had been back and forth to Maui a couple of times, like shipped, because I lived there for 3 years, and now it's back here. It's like, this car runs fine. I said, all things considered, this car does 99% of what every other car does. It's comfortable. The AC works, it starts, it's got airbags and safety features. I said, this is a great car. And they're like, this is a horrible car, Dad, like a horrible car. And, one thing interesting, Brett, too, about stuff like this, and these are little decisions, but like, if I go buy that car, and you know this from being a finance guy, if I go put $100,000, like I really like the new Bronco, the 2022, I'd love to get what's the version that they do on the Fords, the Raptor. I'd love to get a Raptor version full-size Bronco. Oh my God, those things are so cool looking right now on the roads. But it'll cost me like $90,000. If I finance that car and I want to go buy a house or another condo for cash flow, you know what a banker thinks about me? Like, everybody else loves the Bronco, and I didn't spend all my cash to get it. But the banker sees the Bronco on my expenses, living expenses, and it literally cost me the condo purchase that might make me $100,000 a year net because I stuck $80,000 on a Bronco note. They can't stand the look of those sorts of things. The bank will you can have a nice, huge home, and they're kind of okay with that asset underwriting the loan, right? But when you throw big ass cars on there and try to get a loan, man, it hurts your ability to go forward with your financial acquisitions and home purchases, real estate acquisitions. But I don't know if you've ever experienced that before, but the bankers can't stand those massive car loans.
We were a Dave Ramsey blessed advisory firm, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't do everything like he, I'm not an all cash guy, but I'm a low debt guy for sure.
Yeah.
So I've never had a problem on that side because I always pay my bills too. Right. And my mind, and even when I went to acquire Hometown, like, I know that if I don't do those things like you're talking about, if I don't go and buy that Bronco, if I don't go, I call it dry powder. It gives me more dry powder. So when that next big thing comes along, I'm ready to rock and roll. I can move faster than the next guy. So I can get that deal. Whereas someone else has to go to the bank and beg and plead, and it takes them, 90 days to make the deal happen. I can just sit there and be like, I can dictate it, right? I'm in the driver's seat that way. And that's the way I like it.
I'm more of a Robert Kiyosaki type guy than a Dave Ramsey guy, but I keep my expenses really low. The idea, if I have low expenses and I have some passive income or real estate income or stock, then I'm out of the rat race as soon as I pop above it. So,
Yeah.
and then the stronger I can get, I don't mind having debt as long as it's really well written debt, like the income off of that is being doubled, tripled. So if I can collect rents at 3 times my debt service and overall expenses, I feel pretty golden even through some economic calamity or world disease or some sort of situation like that. So
Absolutely. And that's why I ride the middle is what I tell people. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad long time ago, right? And honestly, a lot of what he says, buy assets, that stuck with me forever. That was a huge thing.
So like the house that I live in is below my ability. So there's people that have houses literally like 7 times more expensive that, or that I know, but they don't make any more. They're just strung out on a house payment. And where I live in Texas, our real estate taxes are ludicrous. So it's a good state to earn income in. It's a horrible state to own a personal home in, right? What's that?
That's like here, our taxes are crazy. Like, we'll have a neighborhood, like my neighborhood was a 2.9 mill rate. It's almost 3%. It's nuts.
Yeah, we're over 3% in the city here, but you can go get ag property or other states, and you can literally pay 1/10 that, depending on what state you're in, or if you're ag or out of the city or not. So I don't want to have my personal residence in a high tax area. I don't want to go buy that. Right now, all the property values have gone up. I couldn't imagine owning a $2 million home that's my personal residence and having to pay $65,000 a year in taxes. I mean, it just, and then you bump right out of the rat race, back into the rat race because your house doubled in value,
And any money.
and it doesn't make you any money. And the normal appreciation of real estate over the course of time is eaten up in upkeep and taxation. They're basically bumping the amount that you would make and popping off the tax dollars on it. So here in Texas, since we don't have state income tax, our property taxes are ludicrous. So you got to pick your battles and stuff. So I'll take a more modest home and fix up the grounds and the inside more and enjoy where I am by fixing it up before I'll go take money and just buy bigger, more stuff.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that at all. That's similar minded for sure.
Nolan Walker here for DataPins, DATAPINS, that's datapins.com. It is software that was literally made for a roofer for ultimate organic domination. You can put it on every phone you have out in the field. There's also a desktop version of it. Anybody can use it. It takes 90 seconds. You take up to 6 photos of a job, write a quick caption like roof replacement with GAF HD timberline shingles. You put in your client's cell phone and or email and tag your roof replacement page and your city page and hit pin. It automatically grabs the geo coordinates, wraps it in schema. Looks like a red pin drop, but to Google it looks like a digital hand raise. Hey Google, we were here. By the way, here's several photos of the job, which by the way count as unique content. And here's what we did, a roof replacement with GAF HD timberline shingles. Also, it posts back to the Google account itself with the caption and the photos, and it shoots an email and text back to the client saying, please review us on Google or BBB with a couple of links and choices of review sites. All this is awesome stuff. So now regularly, imagine having this done 30 times, 50 times a month, and Google sees fresh content, fresh pictures, fresh geo coordinates. Even if a client doesn't leave you a review, which 9 out of 10 probably won't, every client becomes valuable to you at this point because you're getting valuable organic signaling. A geo coordinate as a digital hand raise, this validates your map area, and with fewer reviews helps you go into the PAC3 map rankings. It also expands the amount of times a map can show up because of the organic keywords, and the keywords help the organic underneath the map show up as well. DataPins is simply fantastic. It makes blogging look horrible. This is the type of signaling that helps people get dominant on Google. And if you've never gotten dominant on mapping and organic and reputation reviews on Google, you've got to try DataPens. Look it up, datapens.com. If you're interested, call us or email us. We'll see you later.
Got any good stories, mistakes? Like, did you do anything that you wish the heck you hadn't done? Or like when you first bought into the business, anything that, I don't know, cost you money, messed you up? Is there any big lessons that were big lessons, like stepping right into it?
Yeah. I mean, as far as roofing in hometown goes, I think
Yeah.
in acquiring a business, I think one of the things I would do more of is talk to the people more that are in the business that you are looking at.
Right.
The people component is a huge one. You know, when I first took over hometown, I thought I had a manager and different positions in place, and then you get in here and it turns out it's like they have different ideas than you do, and you almost take. I went, you know, in my mind, it's like I went backwards. And
I'm assuming you treaded lightly though when you first get in the door, right? You tread lightly because you have to learn.
Yeah, I ask a ton of questions.
People. Yeah.
Yeah, and things happen and life happens, and this isn't a, you know, it's not an enormous business. So ultimately, what I thought of what I would be doing turned into me doing everything or most everything, right? Which I'm sure most business owners experience. So it was a blessing in disguise, right? Like most
Right.
yes, mistakes or failure.
Did you become more profitable from that experience than what it originally was?
I think I learned more, and now I'm definitely more profitable now because of it. Because I ended up, two things happened. Kind of a manager left, a hailstorm hit. I basically was working 7 days a week the first year because I was doing everything in here. So I figured out every single little nook and cranny and position.
Yeah,
now.
good for you. Yeah.
So it was helpful. Would I want to do it that way again? Probably not.
So do you door knock? Have you been out door knocking? I always ask people, did they door knock before you bought it?
Yeah, hometown was originally set up. You know, I think we had a conversation about this once. Like his name was Ray Archibald. He was like an OG of storm chasing.
Yeah.
He would go all around the country. So he hooked up with a local company here, which is Hometown Roofing, and he would bring in, you know, 30 sales guys and a bunch of crews.
Okay.
So and from, you know, a couple of guys being here to a huge company. So they would go door knock. So that's originally how it got started. Well, over time, this brand, you know, a brand was built. So when I got in here in 2019, the only advertising that the previous owner was doing was in the phone book. Right. And my phone still rang. We were still, I mean, could we have been busier? Absolutely. But I didn't necessarily have to go out and chase. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to take this business over, is I knew that fact that.
So when I was in business in home security, and now, of course, I mean, we digitally market only, and we digitally market, but home security I always bring up because it was a huge door knocking business, and I was too scared to door knock. And I wish I had done the digital part and the door knocking for inbound calls and outbound outreach, you know, but I never door knocked. And I do think it's worth at least entertaining door knocking, like because I think it's such a good thing for a roofer, at least to the neighbors of a job that's going down, like what they call the 6-pack, where you knock the neighbors and say, hey, we're over here. You know, if you'd like a estimate, you know, but if you hear some noise, we're over here, and introduce yourself type thing. But I do like door knocking for a roofer, although I will tell you, I didn't door knock a bit when that was the only thing anybody did. And I sold more home security systems than almost anybody because I was branded and online digitally and everybody could find me. So I didn't do it. No.
I think I'd like to do both. Like I once I get kind of my, what do you want to call it, inside sales piece set up, the digital side, like obviously that's up with you, right? We're kind of just starting to get that stuff going.
Right.
Free here. I would like to get it into the door knocking more, but again, that's a whole nother skill set and set of systems. And I don't have, it's not the time to focus on that for me.
Yeah.
That's definitely a place where I would
Think
like
about
to
it. And when you're out at a job site one day, just go knock on a couple of neighbors' doors and break the ice on it, just go and get it
Yep.
over with. And all you gotta do is knock on the door and be personal and nice and tell them a story and hand them a card,
And I do that. I mean, we definitely get some work from that. It's just not a focused effort. Like I know
get
if
it.
it was, because I know there's, what is it, Avco Roofing out of Denver. I've heard him. I can't remember the owner's name, Heath or something. I mean, that's their MO, right? Your salesman goes, you sell a job, you got to sell all the neighbors too, right?
Well, you knock the door of at least 6 or 7 or 8 of them, and then you hand them a card, and then you give them a $250 referral bonus. And then you're working the whole area, and then you got your signs in the yard, you got your wrap trucks driving around.
Yeah. And that's how you kind of take over.
And you literally can double the business out. So you get a digital lead, and then you go out there and stick yard signs up, shake a few hands, take a picture with a couple of babies, give them what I call the Texas good old boy routine. Just say, hey man, if you hear some noise, that's us. If you'd like an estimate, I sure would like to give you one. But other than that, man, nice to meet you. Here's my card. And then you're off. And then they drive by and say, well, that Nolan guy was pretty nice. There's that yard sign. I was taken back a little bit and had my defenses up when he knocked on the door, but I think I'll give him a call. And there goes that truck again. That's that guy, Brett, running down the road. And I'll see people like literally double, triple their business off of doing these things. So it's interesting. Yeah. So any advice you'd give anybody to kind of wrap things up here? Like, what would you tell people from what you've learned so far to save them some headaches? Do you have any, besides the financial stuff that we kind of went over, but do you have any other advice?
Yeah. I mean, educate yourself. I mean, that's the best thing, right? Don't stop being curious. I think that's
learn every position in the company, right? I think that's a resounding thing for me. Learn it all.
There's nothing that you're not above anything. Don't get entitled, right? Like grind it out and learn what you need to learn.
Learn how to read your QuickBooks, scrub a toilet if you got to. I always use that example. I still clean out the trash cans every once in a while. I'm not above that here at my company. I take the trash out. I could tell someone else take the trash out. It's a humbling experience to take the trash out. I haven't cleaned the toilet here at the new offices, but I used to do that. But it saves a little bit of money. I don't like people in here cleaning the office when I'm not here, So we clean up together sometimes. And but yeah, learn a little bit of everything. Like that's why I said if you haven't done door knocking, Brett, you should absolutely do door knocking, because it's too big of a stone to leave unturned in this business, It's just one of those big ones. We used to listen to phone calls of some roofers, and I don't really do that anymore, but like I would listen to them. Like I listened to guys' phone calls after a hailstorm, and holy cow, it was more, I would say roughly a third of the calls, maybe 30% came from digital. The reason, it's not like he didn't get tons from digital, but he was so good at extending the lead. And so he had yard signs out, knocking just a few doors, neighbor bonuses if they recommended somebody. Back then, I think it was $100, but nowadays people do like 200, 250. And then people from church knew him. They had a very prolific salesperson. A lot of people knew this sales guy, and the second sales guy or estimator, they knew him too. I mean, he had wrapped trucks. They'd see the trucks around town, and he had a lot of digital, but he didn't pay for many leads. Like he wasn't paying for ads, pay-per-click. He wasn't paying for leads, but it was just seeing the name around town, trucks, people. Church came up a lot. Neighbor referrals came up a lot. And it was impressive how much more business came off of spinning the brand out. And I was surprised. I'm not a huge fan of trucks and truck wraps, but if you're in an area where it can take notice, or you yourself live in a neighborhood, I don't
Yeah.
think it's dumb to wrap a truck.
I've done it. I think it does more than you think.
It does.
Going back to the financial side is like, you look at a billboard, like at least around here, it might cost you $2-3 grand a month to have a billboard, right? Well, for that same 1 month price, you can wrap a truck.
Correct.
You got a billboard all around town. So
Right.
I know people notice it. I know when people notice it, sometimes I'll have neighbors or people I know. It's like, oh, hey, I saw you out on such and such street. It's like, I haven't left the office all day, but all my trucks are wrapped the exact same way. So who do they, right?
I saw you out, or I'd park at the end of the parking lot at my church on Sundays. I'd take my wrap truck out and park that down there. And I'd like just seeing the truck around town, especially in the neighborhood. There's a roofer on my same street, and he's got a wrapped boat and a wrapped F-250 that's jacked up. The jacked up F-250 all painted up underneath it. That's that $120,000 car, maybe more. I don't know how much that truck costs, but it's a really big truck. But he drives respectfully up and down the streets of the neighborhood. He doesn't like gun it and like, he's not leaving like a plume of diesel fuel on all the neighbors as he goes down the street. But well, man, I appreciate you coming on. I think you're doing everything right. It sounds like you're doing a lot of stuff correctly. I'm not one to judge necessarily. I'm just really good at marketing, and I've dealt with a lot of roofers. People ask me how I got into this before. Man, we did a lot of marketing. I was in home security, and nothing worked unless the leads were low cost, and I had enough branding. I made money when I was branded and had good leads. So eventually I ended up doing this for other people. And I kind of honed in on a roofer, because the roofer out of the contractors is the entrepreneur. So the other contractors a lot of times are the contractor, and I don't have a problem with that, but the roofer's not usually the contractor. The roofer is a business person that went into roofing. And so I get along with them because of that. And the roofer can make a lot of money and become a good client. And it's a good two-way street. So we get paid, they get paid, and everybody's happy. I like working with roofers because of these things. And a roofer is really similar to me as far as what they're going for, what they're trying to accomplish. I always told my daughter, as a wanting to know about business, my son, I was like, there's two things you got to do besides invest. You're either going to sell a large ticket item or a residual item. If you don't get residuals, or if you don't get large ticket, as far as your income is concerned to start your career of investing, you just won't make any money. It's almost impossible to sell a low ticket item or to not have a residual and earn income, right? Very difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a restaurant, for example, like that's tough,
Need a lot more people, that's for sure.
Take a lot of hamburgers to make the same amount of money as a hailstorm, right? Heading through your market. Well, Brett, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time. Things are going well. We didn't even go into the type of materials you sell or anything like that, but it's just, if anybody, it's Hometown Roofing out of Omaha, Nebraska. If you're curious, I know that you do mainly shingle. I call you Shingle Storm Insurance. I think you'll throw up a metal roof, maybe, if I had to remember, gutters, siding, and single ply.
You got it. We do mostly shingle. That's what our wheelhouse is. Gutters, gutter covers. Definitely do some siding, mostly vinyl siding, and then single ply. And we really on the single ply stuff for businesses, we live in that arena of the, let's say it's 20 to 75 squares, kind of your mom and pop shops, because they're like us. They're small business owners a lot of times, and we know what kind of crunch it is on them to get a new roof, because a lot of times those aren't always the hailed out roofs. Those are out of pocket a lot of times too. So we're
pocket stuff. Yeah. So so you're not doing huge commercial work, just mainly one residential roof at a time is what you're into.
Yeah. I mean, the huge, we can do big commercial roofs as far as shingling, but on the single ply, I don't have the manpower at this point. So I don't try to be something I'm not.
Yeah.
I want to do things that I know we can do really well.
Yeah.
And definitely the shingle arena, the smaller single ply, and siding and gutters.
I tend to, well, let me say this, guys that do what you do tend to be more stable, making money long-term. A lot of people love TPO when they get into it. They do a $300,000 TPO job, put 100 grand in their pocket, and they're like, and I don't blame them. It's like finding a streak of gold or something. They want to get more of it.
Yeah.
And I work with a lot of roofers. I work with a lot of the coatings Conklin guys. I understand commercial really well, but it's scary, man. You go out there, it's a feast or famine deal. Ton of those coatings guys, I don't know if coatings don't go quite as well up in Omaha, I wouldn't think, just because of the temperature and stuff, but you can probably still roof coat. A lot of that material has to be 41, 42 degrees to activate.
Yeah, we do some coatings. It's just not, I find it only very rare instances, in our opinion, where it makes sense, because a lot of times you're doing a bunch of repairs before you do the coatings anyway. So it's like, oh, at what point is it better just to
a proper roof system for a coating is cleaning that roof off, getting it prepared, the pre-roof material, and then caulking all the fasteners. And I mean, there is a lot of work. And then the caulk on the fasteners sometimes has to be coated as well with a UV coating, depending on what kind of caulk you used. And
and we have those capabilities. It's just that's not the wheelhouse that I live in. But if it makes sense, we'll get it done.
Do you do a metal roof at all, or not really?
Yeah, we'll do metal roofs, but again, just in our market.
People don't want to pay for a metal roof, basically, right? They like the look of a metal roof, don't want to pay for a metal roof. So a lot of estimates, very few conversions on it.
And in our experience too, the way that insurance is going with cosmetic exclusions, it's tougher, because around here, when you do have the hail, and if you didn't pick the thickest, nicest metal, right, you're going to have a golf ball looking roof at some point.
But it still holds water, right? So
exactly, it still functions correctly. So it's just a battle we don't wage here with the insurance.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, we put them on some Culvers. Culvers. We did one of those roofs a year ago, and that was a nice standing seam. But other than that, you don't see a lot of residential around here. But
architectural roofs, I think we talked about this. Will you do like a synthetic slate, for example?
Yeah, we'll do Da Vinci's, Cedar. We've done quite a few of those recently.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on, and we'll be in touch. Call anytime, by the way. I wish you well. I hope you have an awesome season. It looked like it might have hailed here last night. It got cold out of nowhere, and it's like we're about to hit June. It's May 24th, and last night, the last couple of days, it's been cold, and there's been clouds, and I've been waiting for hail to drop, but it just has not dropped. Right. So, all right, man. Take it easy, Brad. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you.
All
right. We'll see you, man.